On today's episode, we meet with Libby Healy to talk about how to turn internal knowledge into the fuel that drives customer value realization.
Libby is the KCS Program Manager at Tyler Technologies, where she helps customer-facing support teams capture their knowledge to create more valuable content for customers.
You're listening to the Meaningful Content Mixer. I'm Bonnie, a content professional focused on pre-sales and product marketing.
And I'm Sarah, a content professional focused on post-sale knowledge management. Together, we like to explore what it takes to create meaningful content that is purposeful, demand-driven, and contextually relevant.
We are sharing strategies, tactics, and stories that help content professionals across disciplines create more meaningful content that drives successful outcomes for their customers.
Let's get started. Well, hi, Libby. We're so happy to have you on our Meaningful Content Mixer podcast today. Where are you speaking to us from?
Hey, you guys, I am so excited. So I am here in my home in Thorndike, Maine. So I am in Mid-Coast, Maine. I've been so lucky with all of the move to work from home with COVID. I've always worked from home during my tenure at Tyler Technology. So I get to live in Maine on my 200-acre farm, and I still get to work for an amazing company. So I am very, very lucky.
That's amazing. That sounds wonderful.
Yeah, we'll have to record another episode sometime just about your farm. So we'll save that for another conversation.
Or I'll film by a window and I'll try to get one of the cows to kind of peek in and see if I can get one of them.
That's so funny.
So Libby, you mentioned Tyler Technologies. So what, tell us a little bit about your role as a content professional.
Sure. So I came to Tyler Technologies specifically to start a knowledge-centered service program. So they had been wanting to start a KCS program for years. And when this position opened up, it was just such an amazing opportunity for me to be able to start a net new KCS program. This is something that I had done once before at another fabulous company called Athena Health. So I just saw this as a great opportunity to launch another program. And I'm thrilled it's going so well. All of our knowledge articles were at a really good place when our entire support team had to shift to working from home.
Oh, wow.
And so it was really kind of this amazing success story for our KCS program. It had been in place for about 6 months. Before kind of overnight, everybody was, they could sometimes stand up and kind of like gophers, like look around and ask each other questions, and kind of overnight that had to end. So our knowledge base was already at a place that it could really support our support teams and others during that transition. So it's a really special story for me.
Oh, wow,
wonderful.
So great.
Yeah. And for those who are listening who maybe haven't heard of KCS, could you sum it up briefly? How would you describe KCS to someone who's never heard of it? Knowledge-centered service.
Knowledge-centered service. So knowledge-centered service is a methodology, and it's a methodology that supports taking the knowledge that's primarily on support teams and turning that knowledge into short and very kind of laser-focused knowledge articles. So it's a way of turning kind of the information into actionable knowledge for clients to solve specific issues. So KCS is all about sharing knowledge and the knowledge of internal teams, which is something that I'm very, very passionate about. And I actually came at being a content professional kind of from a different angle. I majored in journalism in college, specifically within the environmental field. Discovered that the only people that wanted to hire me to write about environmental issues were actually doing a lot of environmental damage. And so didn't really get to use that degree. Went into tech, and I started in support using documentation that was provided to be my tech writers. I moved into operations and started creating some content and started working with specifically with tech writers to create content. And so kind of got to see the content creation process from many different points of view. And I think that was, one of the things that I decided while I was working in support was that support needed something different in order to be able to support clients, and our clients needed something different too. And that kind of started me on this whole journey of how can we all come together? We all have so many important pieces to this puzzle, and how can we bring everyone together to start kind of conceptualizing this knowledge as a service that we provide to our clients. So not like this is pre-sale knowledge, and this is implementation training, and this is post-sale kind of product documentation, but how do we create this holistic service that stays with our clients throughout their entire life cycle with us? And how do we all learn from each other to make this knowledge something really, really powerful? And so this has been such a neat journey. And I was so thrilled to hear that you two had really started this conversation about kind of this pre-sale, post-sale content creators, and how we have so much to share with each other. And how our content will just get so much better the more that we talk to each other and collaborate.
Yeah, and speaking of that, we do like to focus on that, sort of how those lines have blurred and how content professionals really exist across the organization in many different teams, even the non-obvious ones. And so you're talking about support agents here. In your experience, do support agents or support engineers see themselves as content creators, or is that sort of an impression you have to change for them?
Right. I think that's something that we, as a group, we all kind of need to change how we think about knowledge. So, and I think this is something that the pre-sale kind of, Bonnie, you have articulated this really eloquently in the past, how kind of the context around the knowledge, the feelings that people have around the information that they're reading, how that is as important as the message that you're trying to deliver. And I think the pre-sales teams really are so good at this right now. Because, let's face it, like post-sale for our product documentation, that's not a destination location for anybody. Like nobody wakes up and says, ooh, I'm just going to read release notes today, like, all day, and I'm going to love it. But like there's an event, there's an event that drives clients to look at product documentation. And there is so much context around that event. Like, reading product documentation is what happens after what happens. So something happens for the client, and then they go to product documentation. And there's so much context and feeling around that. And then, like, if you kind of start thinking about knowledge as a service, you can really start taking jobs to be done philosophies and methodologies and really start applying it to the service that you want to provide. So there's somebody, I'm kind of going to paraphrase this, but there was somebody within Jobs to be Done that says, nobody really wants to buy a 1/2-inch drill bit. What they really want to do is drill a 1/2-inch hole. And it's the same thing for our documentation. Nobody really wants to read product documentation. What they really want to do is blank. And so there's a ton of context around what they want to do. And so if we can kind of start infusing the context of what drove the client to look at product documentation, and then the context around what do they want to do, that will infuse our product documentation with so much added information. And that is the knowledge that the internal teams have. So they are kind of these internal teams that are like day in, day out, talking to our clients in their client context. They have so much information in their head around why clients are reading the documentation and what they actually want to do. And that is the knowledge that I think we as technical writers need to get better at kind of drawing out of them. Because they don't see it as valuable knowledge that they need to be sharing. And so we need to kind of help them understand that they have such value And then we need to get better at kind of drawing that information out of them.
Yeah, that's a great point. They have all that context of the scenario that the customer's going through. Like, to your example of what the customer's trying to do in that moment, it's often also layered with other tools or services that aren't your own. And the support agents are used to asking about that. What browser are you using? What plugin are you using? What program are you trying to screencast at the same time as this? Is that causing a conflict? Like, zooming out from the customer's perspective and finding a way, like you said, how can you capture that not just during the support interaction, but infusing that into the knowledge or content that gets delivered through other mechanisms like self-service or embedded in onboarding journeys? How can we connect those?
Everything that you said is so true. There's often so much a bigger story behind what the client is trying to do. Like the person that wants to drill that half-inch hole, what they really want to do is build this little step for their 10-year-old dog so that their 10-year-old dog can climb up onto the couch with them with less pain. Like, you know,
Right.
There's emotion behind why somebody wants to buy a drill bit. And if we can really kind of start to let the client know that we get that, you know, this is our information, but provide it to them in a way to say, we understand the challenges that you're having. We understand what it is that you're trying to do. And here's how you can use our tools to do X, Y, Z, which is what it is that you're actually trying to do. And so it's not that we need to get rid of product documentation at all. I think it's invaluable. I think we just need to kind of frame it within some context that makes it more personal for them. And I think, you know, we as content professionals, we need to start getting better at how we ask those questions to internal teams. Like, we can't just come to them and say, what should we tell our clients? Like, we actually need to sit with them and observe what's happening and try to pull this context out of them in kind of different ways. Because I think it's tacit knowledge, is this knowledge that's kind of in their heads and they don't really know that it's there. And so how do we kind of go in and start pulling this stuff out?
That's such a good point too, because people often don't even know what they want or what they need. And so if you ask them, they'll tell you one thing, but then if you observe, you might get something completely different.
Yeah. That's why I know a lot in our industry, especially in the post-sales world, a lot of evaluation or assessment is done based off of surveys. Like, here's a survey. I'm asking you customers some 5 questions. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you want. Here's an extra box for you to type in your thoughts. And it's better than nothing. But I think that as an industry, we over rely on surveys to sort of give us the pulse of what's going on, and that and we're moving in this direction, fortunately, with advancements in AI and other technology, where we actually have to observe behaviors and not ask people to talk about behaviors or capture what they think.
Exactly. That's so true. And again, I feel like this is something that the pre-sale arena somehow has really gotten right. They really understand what is drawing a client to look at the pre-sale information, and then what is it that they want to do with it? What do they need that information to do for them? And somebody who I've been watching a lot and reading a lot is a woman named Kathy Sierra. And she has been a woman in the tech industry kind of forever, which makes her really, really neat. So she has seen things kind of come and go. She talks about, you know, how she used to be just so into behavior design and now she kind of doesn't like it. So she's been able to like go through these different threads of popular things within the tech industry. And she talks about a lot how in our pre-sale documentation, we get the feelings so right, we get the context so right, but as soon as a client hands us cash, they kind of fall through this trap door, and suddenly they're just getting product documentation, like with a picture of a camera and a lot of arrows pointing at all the camera, and the good feelings that they had about being a photographer and documenting their world, like those good feelings are just gone. When at product documentation. And how do we get those good feelings back for our clients, how do we just acknowledge their feelings as they're accessing our resources? And I think, different support teams, whether it's an implementation team or a customer success manager or somebody who's actually on the phones and support, they exist kind of in this Bermuda Triangle of the product, the client, and client documentation. And so they're in that area all day, every day. And they're just such a context kind of resource for us.
Right. And so we need to make sure that we're drawing that context out, as you've said, and capturing it in a way that it's funneling back to the other content resources in the post-sales world. Yeah, it seems so true that in the pre-sales side of things, that understanding customer context and intent and what's driving behaviors is so important in that product research and innovation and roadmap planning side of things. And then it gets translated into features, as it should, that get released. And then when those features get released back to the other side, to existing customers, all that context, not all of it, but a lot of it sort of gets lost. And we need to find ways to carry that through, I think.
Right. I think a company that does this very, very well. So I work in Atlassian products kind of all day, every day. That's where I am. And I remember one time I was just researching kind of escalation management, like how can we improve escalation management? And I came across a blog on the Atlassian community, and the blog was just saying, have you ever been in a Sev1 situation where the client is very angry, the client is escalated, your leaders feel like you're not keeping them in the loop, there's multiple email chains, everybody's making decisions, nobody's taking responsibility? If so, kind of read on. And I was just like, I feel so seen. Yes. And that was just those 2 sentences of describing my experience. And then saying, if so, watch this video and here's a playbook. And the playbook drew from all of these different pieces of their product documentation. And Bonnie, this is kind of going to your point of, but then it told me how to build what I needed. It told me, this is how you build a better communication platform. This is how you build, like, what is the decision-making structure? Like, it walked me through kind of what I wanted to do with their product. And I could have figured this all out with their documentation, but this just put it into such an actionable context that it just worked for me. And as I was reading it, I was kind of thinking about this theme and thinking, oh, their content management team, they don't deal with Sev1 issues, but they went and watched other teams that do, and they were able to say, oh, wow, you guys have actually something really good here. I think this is something clients would really, really like. And they obviously were able to kind of pull this out of the people who were actually using the product and supporting clients and using the product. So, I emailed that YouTube video to so many people I knew. You guys gotta watch this. These guys got it.
They get it. Yeah, as you were talking, it was reminding me really of, we talk about funnels on the sales and marketing side. And so we should be taking those same concepts. If it's working to draw folks in, what's the content funnel or the journey on the post-sale side? And yeah, the example you just gave is perfect.
Exactly.
And I see, oftentimes documentation is a checkbox, right? So it's like, do we have the docs? If the docs exist, check. But it's more than that. And really, we should be thinking about content as a path to value realization for the customer. And that's what helps them realize their value as they're using the product. It's not just the product and having a support person to talk to and having your success, which are all important, but the documentation itself for them to self-help and learn on their own time and really get good at the product. It seems like it's, it adds to value realization, which is really important. It's more than just a checkbox.
Absolutely. And I think that is such a good way of kind of pointing out the difference between kind of having content as almost like a byproduct of product creation. You get your release notes and you get to go check, and then the release notes go into product documentation and you get to say check. instead kind of taking that shift to saying, okay, what if knowledge was a service? So instead of having knowledge as a byproduct that then maybe we kind of like make a little bit prettier, what if we took the knowledge that very important knowledge that's created during product creation, and we say, how do we turn this into the service, into our knowledge service for our clients? And what does that mean for different clients? I think, you know, as clients kind of evolve on their journey with a product, in the beginning, they might need a lot of hand-holding, but then what they want to do is become a pro. They want to become an expert and excel. They want to feel like, you know, an amazing project manager or whatever it is that they're doing with this documentation. And so how do you kind of step a client through their life cycle? How does this knowledge service make our client not only great with our product, but feel good about their job, or feel good about whatever product that they're using, that it's improving them, that it's improving their lives. And so, you know, this knowledge service could really be something fantastic. But we just have to kind of start looking at it in a slightly different way.
Yeah, actually, this conversation is making me realize something that happened in the last couple of weeks, a release note that I was, you know, I'm part of the release note cycle, and we released a new feature that's an integration with another tool. And I'm realizing now I completely missed this opportunity because the release note just says, here's this integration. Here's how you go into our platform and set up the integration. Now, great, you have a new integration.
Now you got it.
The truth is we know a lot about why we created, our engineering team created this integration for a reason. There's a lot that we can offer up in terms of guidance for them, even though it's along with a third-party tool. We can really nudge them in the right direction in terms of understanding and guiding them how they would use these tools together. And I admit we did not take advantage of that opportunity. I want to go back next week and create more guided content around that.
Monday morning. Exactly. Like maybe part of our documentation is not only just kind of documenting, but then having like how you could look like a superstar in using this. Like here's 4 ways to rock your year-end performance review using this.
Right.
Or something.
How can they level up? We've talked about before, like how at software companies especially, it would be huge if software companies' internal KPIs were based off of the clients getting promoted. Like I love that idea, or the clients leveling up in their career. And it's not necessarily a straight line in terms of measuring that, but if you could somehow bring that into the fold of how you're measured, I think that would be huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea. Like, what if we really got to start saying, do we make our clients rock stars? Do we make them superstars? And how do we do that? How do we communicate to them how you can use our product to be a rock star at your company? I love that idea. So another thing that I wanted to kind of touch on was, so we kind of started off this conversation, and Sarah, you asked, I think, a really great question in, do I think internal teams believe that they are content creators, or do they believe that they have a place in the content creation kind of life cycle? And I think right now they don't see themselves as a value creator within that. But I think, I really think that they could and they should see themselves through the context that they have, that they are incredible value adds to our knowledge creation process. I think so often the folks that are on the front lines with our clients, they're just seen as cost centers, and they're not seen as value add centers. And I think that is so wrong. These teams, what the context that they can infuse kind of what we are creating as content creators, I think is what can take our content from being information to being powerful knowledge. And I think if we could somehow if I could somehow find the way to communicate this to these teams, to say, you have such value. What's in your head is so valuable. Let me help you get it out. Let me help you share it. And then for other parts of the company to start seeing the value that these teams can share and can create.
Yeah, definitely. Last time we talked about feedback loops, and we were talking about it in a different context, but what you just said is making me think about it now, which is that what's the feedback loop back to these unself-identified content creators? How are we making sure that they see the trickle value of their knowledge and bringing that back to their awareness, so then they feel motivated to keep participating in that? And how are you building a cycle or a loop to continue that awareness?
Exactly. So kind of in this knowledge as a service concept, I think you can also start bringing in some agile methodologies as well. So if this is a service, then we have rituals where we all sit down and we talk about, okay, this is what went really well. These are the people that contributed to this. How do we keep this going? And those feedback loops are kind of inherent. But as long as all of our knowledge teams stay very, very separated, it's going to be hard to get that flow going. So I think as we continue to move forward to seeing knowledge as its own thing, not just a byproduct of other things, and how all of our teams can work together, I think those feedback loops are going to become a way that we do things.
Right. It's a matter of amending our workflows so that the end of the workflow isn't publishing, or even, I think typically the end of the workflow is, okay, you publish and maybe next week or next month, next quarter, you measure how well it went. But where's the automatic gate that you bring back the results internally? And like you said, recognize the folks who participated. And if we actually bake that into our workflow, right, it's part of our process, then it's not something that gets skipped because we're already on to the next thing.
Exactly. Yeah, that I think so often hitting publish is kind of, it's like a dead end. You're like, okay, that's done.
Right.
And this idea of, and Sarah, I think either Sarah or Bonnie, I think this is something that you guys have talked about in the past, that there should be no content dead ends. That it should always just kind of be a flow. And I think a lot of times it's that we don't want the client to come into a dead end, but we also don't want our content to dead end.
Yeah.
Right. Internally.
Exactly. Cool.
Wonderful. So Libby, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to share?
One thing that I've been thinking about is, I think so many of these content discussions, like I know I've mentioned COVID before and everybody going to working from home before. And suddenly we're all having a lot more of virtual meetings. We're also having virtual conferences. And I think this ability to all come together and share knowledge in a more powerful way, I think COVID is kind of putting an exclamation point at the end of this. So I think this is just such an exciting time for content creators, whether it's visual, whether it's virtual, however it comes across. That we really should just kind of suck the marrow out of this. Like, this is an exciting time for us and we need to embrace it. And I know it's scary, but now's the time to just kind of lean into this time so that, whatever normal comes next, we have all gotten better because we all needed to communicate a little bit more virtually for a little while. I really hope that we can all just embrace the lessons that we learn and keep them going. So let's make that a good thing that comes out of this time.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
a great point. I love that.
Good.
Well, one of the things that we like to ask our guests is we like to find inspiration in unexpected places. So where do you find your inspiration?
So I think I mentioned her name before. I've been listening to a lot of Kathy Sierra. And she worked in tech years and years ago. She left tech for a little while and then she went back. When she left tech, she ended up working with horses. She worked in photography. She did a lot of other things. And even though it wasn't in the tech industry, what she says about those other industries is so fascinating and so relevant. And so I think one thing that I've really started trying to challenge myself to do is find interesting women that are outside of my area, outside of my world or my little ecosystem, and listen to what they have to say too. Because so often the things that they talk about, they're relevant to what I'm doing, just kind of in a different way. And so Kathy Sierra has kind of been my bridge into that. But yeah, I'm always on the lookout for other women that are doing fascinating things that in other areas other than mine. So that's where I find my inspiration.
Wonderful.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a lot of fun. I've loved this conversation and we've really enjoyed having you.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun, you guys.